I did, but I passed it the next day.
The story that Steve just told you, I can mirror it. That's exactly what happened to me.
A few weeks on, has it sunk in yet?
Yeah, finally. Difficult season, and yeah, we worked hard to get the result, and we're the 6 times current British truck racing champions.
What memories have you got of Steve racing? I know that you mentioned that as a kid you'd seen the BP truck.
He didn't like me.
No, it's everybody wants. It's what the current situation I'm in. Nobody wants me to win anymore, and I think Steve, he's a legend of our sport, legend of motorcycle racing. Is well known throughout this country. Is a great ambassador for Mercedes as well. So, growing up, my first real thing with Steve was he was winning everything, and as a child, 3, 4, 5 years old, so there was good memories. I wanted Steve to get beat because he was winning everyone, and actually that's what I find myself in that position now, where people want to beat me, and people can't dislike me as a person, but they can dislike you as the favourite, and they want the underdog to win. So yeah, pretty good comparison, but we grew up watching the green BP, and as Steve was just saying before we came into this interview, it's in a museum, and the Steve Parrish green Mercedes, the BP, is probably the most iconic ever truck racing truck that's been built. So yeah, it's an honour to be here with him.
So turn to yourself now then. This year it's the first year that anyone's beaten your record of winning the truck racing championship in a Mercedes-Benz. Did you ever think it would take 20 years to do it, or did you think it was going to be done straight away?
I was hoping it'd never get done. Yeah, I don't know actually. It was pretty important at the time. It was obviously very much liked by Mercedes-Benz and BP and all the support that I had throughout the years. And I must admit, for a number of years, and probably 10 or so years, it didn't look like it was ever going to happen. But that happens in every sport, doesn't it? You start to think that maybe Michael Schumacher's never going to get beaten in Formula 1, and then Lewis Hamilton does it. Eventually it has to happen. I can remember when Giacomo Agostini, the great motorcycle racer, got beaten by Valentino Rossi, and in some ways it makes you feel prouder because you're in the higher echelons of a sport, and to have got there in the first place. So it doesn't disappoint me. I think my wife probably was more disappointed than I was, because she thought I was pretty good, but anyway, someone came along and was better. But I love watching motorsport, truck racing, Formula 1, motorcycles, you name it. But anybody that can win 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or even 5 or 6 championships is a very, very good competitor, and they work hard at what they're doing, and very, very focused people.
How much did you enjoy your truck racing days? Because obviously I know you from being a legend of motorcycle racing. How much did you enjoy it, but what made you get into truck racing?
One of the things I really liked about truck racing was not ending up in strange hospitals and not knowing who I was, because that used to go on a great deal with motorcycle racing. So I was coming, in fact I'd virtually come to the end of my motorcycling career, and it was in 1984 or 5, I can't remember exactly the year, multi-part truck Grand Prix. I went along to Mercedes-Benz UK and said my teammate and mate Barry Sheen was driving a DAF. I can beat him in a truck, but I probably couldn't very often on a motorbike, and incredibly, serendipity, I guess, things happen, and sure enough they managed to find a truck for me from a company called Mitchell Cotts, who were running Mercedes-Benz trucks, and we went along to the multi-part truck Grand Prix at Donington Park, and to this day, and I don't think that'll ever get beat, and there was something like 280,000 people turned up, the M1 was blocked, and it was a new sport, a fascinating sport, and the nice thing I think about truck racing, and I'm diversifying a bit here, and I think Ryan will back me up on it, it's a family sport. You get as many kids as you were a kid coming along, which actually doesn't happen so much with most other sports, so truck racing is unique in that way. If I'm honestly truthful, motorcycle racing was my first career, it was my first love, and it probably would, if I had to put my name on it, motorcycle racing was my first love. Truck racing was great because I was in a situation where I'd retired from motorcycle racing. I was going to end up being a boring team manager, because that's what I was doing in that transitional period period, I'd stopped racing bikes, started running my own team, which was very successful. And then I had an ultimatum from Mercedes-Benz: did I want to run my team or go truck racing? And I felt that while I was still young enough to do it, I'd carry on truck racing. But had an enormous amount of fun doing it. Met some lovely people. Was very much involved in the industry when it was developing diesel engines and developing brakes and developing tyres and you name it. So many things happened in truck racing in that 90s period. It was quite extraordinary, and I'll never forget my career of being a truck racer.
Would you fancy going Ryan's truck?
I'd love a go in a truck now. I mean, I'm going to be a bit old and decrepit, I'm sure, and probably a bit rusty, but yeah, no, I would really like to. I do a lot of motorcycle demonstration races, classic motorcycles. I race at Goodwood, and I go to Australia, South Africa, riding old bikes, but no one's come up with a classic truck racing series yet, so maybe that's something that we should be looking at. Drag some of the old trucks out and get some of the old boys back. I know one or two of them. There's Richard Walker down the road. He still has a run out doing some rallying and things like that. I'm sure we could. Stig Blomqvist, who was a truck racer when I was, is still doing rallying. Martin Brundle had a go with trucks. Sadly, Barry Sheen's not with us anymore, but there's a number of old boys out there. We could perhaps get an old team up or something. But no, I'd love to have a go in a modern day truck. I know I'm going to have to work the stick shift because we had automatics a lot of the time, but I'm sure I could manage that.
And finally, from a bit of research, you actually failed your HGV test. Is that true?
Wow.
Now I did, but I passed it the next day. You didn't do it. I did get an HGV, and it was quite funny because BP, their marketing department, decided that I was maybe 2 or 3 or 4. I can't remember. I'd won the European Championship a few times. They said, "What we're going to do? Put you through an HGV license." And I went to Welch's at Cambridge and did it, and I did 3 or 4 days there, and I went off to Cambridge, and I'd failed probably before I even got in the truck because I turned up in my car with a private number plate on that the guy didn't like, and he thought it was quite disgusting, so that was probably why I failed. But I went back the next day and passed, and it was said that it was insufficient use of my mirrors, so probably I didn't have to turn my head enough. But I did get an HGV, and do you know what? I never got to drive a truck on the road. No one ever trusted me.
I've got to just join into this because the story that Steve just told you, I can mirror it. That's exactly what happened to me.
All right. Okay.
Honestly.
Did it? Right. Okay.
The instructor asked me what I did for a living. I said I race trucks for a living. And it was the worst thing that I ever said in my life.
Yeah, well,
and he was failing me. It was perfect, but he failed me. And you know, I went back. I think it was 3 weeks later, and passed immediately with a different instructor. And the moral of the story was, I didn't tell the second instructor what I did for a living, and it was like I was being a bit cocky, saying that I was racing trucks. So he'd think, oh, you know, he can drive a truck at high speed, he'll do well. Biggest mistake. So I can relate to what Steve just said.
And it didn't help me the fact that Anglia Television there, BBC Lookies and Cambridge Evening News, all there with the cameras, and the bloke went, "I'm sorry to tell you, Mr. Parrish, you failed." So anyway, but I did get my HGV, but no one ever gave me a load to take around. I don't think they thought I could strap them on, but I can back them.